So this idea of the backward step comes from Zen, and is the stepping back from a mental object that is being noticed by awareness, or the noticing, or the perceiving, whatever name you want to call it, and step back one tiny step and rest as the noticing or the awareness. So there is a key element here, which is called this backward step, that leads to the whole enchilada. And it has been there for thousands of years, perhaps, in the Zen tradition. Because if we don't take that backward step with our awareness, because what is stepping back is awareness itself, because attention or awareness are the same thing. They are not two different things. Attention is when awareness is directed to an object, a mental object like a thought or a sensation. So attention and awareness are the same. And then when you take this step back, what you are doing is you are retrieving the attention back to its source. The attention that is flowing towards the objects is being withdrawn back to its source, which is awareness itself. So without this stepping back, this tiny step back, I don't think awakening is even possible. Although, as we will see, there are different forms of awakening. Yeah. And it's a word that can be used for so many purposes, including waking up in the morning. But when in regard to what pertains to this subject, which is spiritual awakening or enlightenment, is very necessary to understand what this backward step is about, and it's nothing complicated. So I would like to get a little bit of feedback from you. I would like to know if you got the idea of the stepping back and rest as the noticing. Anyone would like to share? Yes, please.
Stepping back, I mean, I couldn't really feel like I was stepping back. I was like imagining a different part of yourself, stepping back, looking at yourself.
Yeah, still in that case, if you imagine that you are kind of stepping back and looking at yourself, we would be creating a mental object there, which is this visualization or imagination. The stepping back that I'm talking about happens only in the realm of attention. You are aware of the breath, and then the next moment you step back and you rest as the awareness that is aware of the breath, and then you forget the breath. It's a tiny step back. It happens at the level of your attention, which, as I said, is awareness directed to a point, directed to an object, in this case the breath. It's a sensation that you are experiencing in the chest, perhaps. And then from that sensation you step back and you rest, now away from the sensations. It's not that you will not continue perceiving the sensations. The sensations will be there, but you attain a certain distance, so to speak, from this sensation, and that can include all sensations. If you are doing it with open eyes, you are having many incoming sensations: visual, auditory, tactile, and then you can step back from all of them and just rest kind of at the center of your being. And it's nothing extraordinary. It's nothing extraordinarily special or a wacky experience. No, it's not. But it opens the doors to everything. That was my experience. Because then this triggers a whole analysis of what is going on at that moment and where are you at that moment. That's a process that it involves the intellect also. So I would like more feedback. Yes, Carlo, right?
Yes. Thank
yes.
You. Is it more about removal of any specific attention on anything in particular and just awareness of all it is, or is it more about observing or being aware of self?
Yeah, it's more like being aware of self still could be, kind of tricky, because it's like trying to turn awareness to itself, meaning that it will turn like an eye that wants to see itself. That's pretty difficult, right? It would be impossible. But you can kind of forget the objects that are coming to you, the mental objects or mental sensation, and step back and rest. Rest as us instead of in us. The noticing, the perceiving. Make sense? So when you talk about a diffuse attention, right, contrary to narrow focus and open focus, that's a very useful exercise too, right? It teaches us about the same principle, which is awareness or consciousness, because the word awareness or consciousness are the same. They are not two different words. In Spanish, we don't have a word like awareness. In Italian, neither. I think in French, neither. The word awareness doesn't exist in the Romantic languages so far. So the word awareness and consciousness are really the same. You are conscious of something or you are aware of something. It's exactly the same. So when you take the step back, this step back that Zen has been talking about for so long, you take the step back, you're resting as consciousness. That which is conscious. That which is conscious of the breath, and now you step back and you rest as that which is conscious of the breath. And at that moment you kind of let go of the breath. Let go of putting attention to the breath, so that consciousness can step back and rest in itself. Make sense? So what I have found in regard to this is that this simple thing that we are discussing is at the root of the whole problem. If we understand the step back, we are walking right into the awakening. If we got this, what it means to step back, if we got it, it's very, very simple. There's nothing complicated about it. It doesn't lead to a spiritual experience. Neither it is an spiritual experience. But it begins to teach us about who we really are, or what we really are. Any other one? Yes.
How do we know when we're resting in that awareness?
Okay, good question. Thank you. There are certain things that will indicate you that is happening. One of them is that.
Let me say what I feel, and you can tell me if I'm on the right path.
Okay, tell me.
Because I feel very detached from the room, and the natural inclination is to close my eyes, to go even
Deeper.
More into that.
Yeah, so yeah, that's probably because it's happening. You are resting at that moment. You are resting now as awareness. So, but there's another way to connect the dots that yes, it's happening, and it is that the body also responds to this. The minute you take this step back and you rest as the noticing or the perceiving, the minute you do that, the body tends to respond with a sense of increased relaxation or a deepening of the breath. So if we notice what's going on, we give a little bit of attention to what's going on in the body, we will notice that the body is responding, usually with a shift in the breathing pattern. That's the physical proof, the increased relaxation and the deepening of the breath. It may not be that much, depending on how deep you have been resting, right? And then there is a mental aspect, which is that you feel like a spray of contentment. It's subtle. It's a mist of contentment. Or you could call it joy, or you could call it bliss. All these words, are a little bit, again, they can divert us from something that is very human into something, into getting an idea that this is, again, a wacky experience, a spiritual experience where I will be bliss out. No, it's not about being bliss out. It's just that there is a certain bliss, a smile coming, yeah, subtle, but invaluable, because this, for example, what's the difference between working 8 hours a day doing something that you don't like, or working 8 hours a day doing something that you like? The difference is very little. Maybe doing something that you don't like, you even make more money. But during those 8 hours, as you're doing something that you like, you will likely be enjoying what you're doing, right? And joy comes from the word joy. So there will be a certain joy throughout those 8 hours. If you don't like what you're doing, then during those 8 hours you will be experiencing boredom or frustration. Now, what's the difference between spending 8 hours in enjoyment or 8 hours in frustration? It's huge, right? It's huge. Although it seems that it's just a different feeling, right? But it's the difference between being happy or unhappy. So when we connect with this feeling of contentment, something very significant has happened. The problem is that we don't, the ego structure, our programs tend to do not give to this type of feelings that are subtle the tremendous importance they have. Yes, please.
So I find it a very peaceful, relaxing state to experiment with that. I'm feeling the ears is very warm, and how do I say? Like throwing a hot bath and you feel really burns.
Yeah. So you're, yeah. So she's explaining for those listening online that she's feeling very relaxed and kind of a warm feeling in her back. Yes.
Yeah, right here.
Yes,
Okay.
right there.
Yeah, and then it's like the thoughts disappear.
Like the thought disappear. Yes.
There's no need to think.
And no need to think.
So it's
Yes.
not a state of beingness, and I feel my awareness being encompassing all this.
More expanded.
Yeah.
You feel like your awareness is kind of expanded.
Yeah.
Has an expanded feeling.
Being.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
being.
Okay.
But it doesn't
Okay.
bring you back though.
Yes.
Kind
More
of,
towards the front.
yeah, it's kind of all like
Yes.
this,
Yes.
I
Yes.
feel it in the back,
Yes.
but I'm not in it.
Yes.
And also when I was looking at that clock there, for some reason my eyes went there, and I was seeing some light around it, little light around
Yes.
it. And it's very
Calming.
it's really good.
Yes. Now, these feelings, feeling good, calm, relaxed, and so on, are delightful, of course, are desirable. But the interesting thing about resting as the perceiving, that which is perceiving, is that it has a quality that is not about feeling good only, which, yes, many times, quite often is the case, that you feel all these nice feelings, but also it has a quality that is transcendent. What I mean by that is that still there could be discomforts in the body, and even a great discomfort in the body, and just by stepping back from the discomfort, stepping back and resting as the perceiving of the discomfort, you transcend the sensation or the discomfort. And the level of transcendence can be different depending on how skillful you are at doing this. But it's quite something to begin to notice that now you are not, for the first time, when you learn to do this and step back, to begin to notice that for the first time in your life, you have found something that is beyond feeling good or feeling bad. That's what I mean by transcendent. It means that it transcends the feeling good and the feeling bad. So that when you step back, if there is discomfort in the body, you allow it to be, but you are resting as the perceiving or the noticing or the awareness, and you are fine. And the importance of this is extraordinary, because you can imagine that at some point, everyone here in the room and everyone there online, we will all have to go through the process of death. And we don't know how it's going to be. Most likely, statistically, kind of unpleasant, right? And to have one way to approach this and being able to be calm and to be okay as the body is approaching great discomfort is a fantastic thing, right? So this is what separates the study of consciousness or non-duality from any psychological or coping strategy or mechanism. See, once this is attained, you can step back from any discomfort, even a negative thought, a negative emotion. You step back, you rest as what you are, as awareness, and at that moment you transcended what was going on the screen of the mind, right? These mental objects that were uncomfortable, sensations, negative thoughts, whatever. You didn't change the content. In coping, I worked as a psychotherapist for 15 years, so I know how it works. You teach the client and you teach them how to cope. And coping means changing the contents of the mind, at least cognitive psychology. You change the thoughts, you talk back to the negative thoughts, you move into a better way of, into better feelings through coping, changing the mental contents. In this case, when you step back and you rest as the perceiving function, you don't cope, you don't try to change the mental objects, you just step back and let it be. Whatever it is there, who cares? It's the mind. Yeah. So somehow what happens is that you become disidentified with what's going on, pleasant or unpleasant. Because the idea is of what we could call a psychology of consciousness is to develop methods to transcend our human state, not to improve it. Because improving it through positive thinking, rational thinking, etc., will only go so far. It's very limited. It's good, it has its place. I teach cognitive psychology still. I think it has its place in life, but a psychology of consciousness where you begin to do these movements in awareness, the stepping back is something that happens completely in your awareness. It's a much more powerful thing. And it leads to something that is really fundamental here, which is a shift in your understanding of what you are. Sooner or later, the minute you begin to play with this, the minute you begin to play with this stepping back and rest as consciousness, I guarantee it, sooner or later the awakening will happen. And the awakening is an insight. And the insight is that the I that you thought you were is conceptual and is not really true. There is not a real being with independent existence inside this body or any body looking out. That doesn't exist. And that the I is only, the me and the so and so is only conceptual, meaning it's made of concepts, it's made of ideas. And you continue to be that which is looking at the thoughts. You continue to be the perceiving of the thoughts, that perceiving that consciousness is what you are really. So the beginning is to play with this in meditation or with your open eyes at any moment, the stepping back and resting as the noticing. But that leads to something that is much more profound, which is a shift in your identity. Or in other words, you let go of the identity. You understand that it makes no sense to attach an identity to consciousness, because there is no way to prove that this consciousness is unique or different from the rest of the universe, because it has no qualities. See, I don't know if you notice it, but what is looking through your eyes right now and is listening through your ears right now, that is not part of the dualistic world. You cannot attach to that any particular qualities. It just is that which is perceiving all the sensations that are coming to you right now. Now you can try this. Another exercise that is pretty cool to see this is You can notice the sensations at this moment. That's very easy, right? We can notice the visual inputs and the auditory inputs. You're listening to my voice and other noises, perhaps. And now from the sensations that are coming, you can notice the noticing. See if you can do it. Notice that there is noticing right now. Here there is abundant noticing, abundant perceiving, tremendous amount of perception. Notice the perception. It's self-evident. And eventually we come to understand that we are this perception. Perception is another word for awareness or consciousness. In the right acception, because there is also a different acception which is, oh, my perception is like my thinking about this. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pure perception. Pure perception or pure perceiving or noticing or awareness or consciousness is exactly the same. There is no difference. These are different words to describe the same thing. And too many words, of course, create abundant confusion. Yes, right.
I notice when I do this exercise that I'm much more present.
Yes.
I'm not distracted elsewhere in my thoughts.
Yes. Because that's another proof that you are resting as consciousness. It is that the mind quiets down. Now the mind quiets down because you're not giving it attention. So if we have a child that is acting out, I used to do parenting classes, to teach parenting classes, and I used to teach this technique that is called the ignoring technique. The child makes a temper tantrum and you ignore the child. And you just keep an eye so that he or she will not hurt herself. But in a little while the child stops the temper tantrum because the mother is not giving him or her attention. Same thing, when we don't give attention to our thoughts, what happens is that they slow down. So we have less thoughts. And then from that place of a quiet mind or quieter mind, because it can it can create it's not a black and white. I don't like black and whites when in communication, right? It's not that the mind has gone completely silent. If you were to do an EEG, you would see movement still, but it has definitely become more quiet. And if it's more quiet, then you can focus the attention into one thing and the mind is not disturbing your focus. Yes.
Also, when you suggested that we become aware that we are aware.
Yes.
When verbally it sounds like we're making our awareness into an object as if there's two of us, but really that's not the case. Experientially, we're just becoming more aware.
Yeah, kind of.
In a sense.
Yes, more aware.
Which includes awareness that we're aware, but it's not an object of itself.
Yes, you can't create a separate object from awareness and look at it. Yeah, so that's you can only withdraw the attention back, and rest the attention back in awareness. That's why it's so important to understand that that awareness and attention are the same thing. It's just that attention is awareness that is being directed to something. Then when we step back, when we take the backward step, we are allowing the attention to go back to its source. That's all that is happening.
feels like attention is also focused. And when we pull back, we're becoming, in a sense, unfocused.
Unfocused, right. There's a defocusing at that moment. And I would say a no focus. It's like you're not focusing into anything, right? It's not like in a defocused attention where you're kind of aware of everything. No, it's more like you're not aware of, you're not interested in anything. You're not interested. Period. You're not interested. The things around, yes, the objects are there, the sensations are there, but you're not interested.
So they become like peripheral vision in a way.
Yeah, like peripheral vision, a peripheral vision that you're not giving attention. So this class is an introduction to the course in spiritual psychology that we offer at the Brain Optimization Institute. We have been offered this course for some time, a few years, and I have noticed through the years that it's getting better. In the beginning it was very challenging, to be honest, because these are not easy things to communicate. The language is confusing and confuses things. So I guess that in this lifetime I have been a teacher quite a few times, and I found this quite challenging. The most challenging subject that a teacher can teach, I would say, is this. Because of you need to really develop a very subtle language to communicate this. So it has taken a while to refine the language, and the course is getting better. I'm getting better feedback from my students, and the course is now in a format that lasts for 10 months, so that we have classes every other week, 3 hours per week, per time, every other week. And then I suggest some books from different authors and some movies or YouTubes that complement what the student learns during the class. I would suggest for all those online and for those here that you have a look to the curriculum summary of the course, where I uploaded the content of each and every one of the classes. Like for this class that you notice there that I wrote down 21 different points that we will discuss throughout the class, and in fact we have already discussed some of them. Also, in this case, for each one of the classes you will find 21 different subjects that you will learn or experiment or discuss throughout the course. The course is designed to produce awakening. It's not only to help the student to do good spiritual counseling, which is something that it can also do, but both. If the student doesn't attain a certain amount of awakening, a certain degree of awakening will be very difficult for them to do the work, to help others to wake up and to do good spiritual counseling. So part of the objective of the course is to help the students to awaken. And that's why we start with a class. The first class is like a formal awakening session, and we go through a protocol. I like to call it the awaken protocol. It's a step-by-step process that leads into a particular insight that helps you to realize that you're not what you thought you were, that you are something else. In simple terms, that you're not the person that you thought you think you are, this conceptual I, that you are just pure awareness. The reason why this simple idea is not really embraced and is not transformed into a deep insight is because we have been conditioned. And this conditioning is pretty complex and deep. And it's basically mental programs. Conditioning is no other thing than programming. So this conditioning has to be brought to light. You have to see it and discard it as false. And when you go through a process like about 20 different conditionings that you remove out of the way, then it becomes more and more clear that, hey, yes, now I am beginning to understand, now at a deeper level, what I am really. So the course starts with this, and then throughout the next 20 classes, because it's a total of 21 classes, we go through different processes and methods to create, to deepening the awakening and to create other insights that are around awakening. Because, for example, you may have heard the word oneness, right? Everyone here has heard the word oneness. Let's talk a little bit about oneness. Some non-dual teachers will say, well, oneness is non-duality. Yeah, well, makes sense, right? Oneness, non-duality. It's a matter of definitions, because consciousness is also non-dual, right? Consciousness, you cannot say that consciousness has duality. That which is seen through your eyes right now doesn't have qualities. It's not good or bad. It's not big or small. It just is. And it's life itself. Because without awareness or consciousness, there is no life there. You would be immediately dead. I mean, the body would die. If awareness is withdrawn completely from your body right now, the body dies. It stops being useful for consciousness, because the body is no more than an object of sensory perception, an organ of sensory perception for awareness. So if awareness is pulled out, then the body is already not useful for awareness, for consciousness, or for the divine, if you want to call it. So look at this. It's very simple. Okay, you have awareness perceiving through each one of these bodies. Each one of these bodies is an organ of sensory perception for awareness. Where is the me? Where is the I? Yes.
It's in the mind.
Huh?
It's in the mind.
It's made of thoughts, right? It's ideas about me. But it doesn't have a reality in nature. It doesn't exist in nature, except as thoughts. So what you have here in this room is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different bodies through which awareness is seen through, perceiving through. That's all that exists in nature. If you try to find the I, show it to me, please. You will never find it. In fact, if you close your eyes and you try to find the I that you think you are, you will never find it. In a million years. Yes.
When I look for the I, there's like a physical sensation that seems to go with it. A little bit of tension. And
Contraction.
Yes.
Contraction.
And there's
Because
a communication with these feelings. That reminds me that I'm me.
right, because the thought The thought of I and me pulls the attention towards it, right? The attention goes there, and then you feel contraction. The focus contracts. Now the oneness, going back to oneness is supposed to be the ultimate non-duality, right? In the Indian scriptures, you find these words. It says, when you awaken, you have the perceiver, the perceiving, and the perceived as one, right? The subject that perceives, the act of perceiving, and the perceived, the object that you perceived, become one. Oneness, right? So if I look at this object, I say, okay, the perceiver is me, quotes. There is this act of perceiving, and the perceived is the glass. But if I wake up, then I see the perceiver, the act of perceiving, and the glass, the object being perceived, as one, right? So that would be oneness. But way before that, you can experience something that is quite simple, and is that the perceiver doesn't exist. So that then you could put in quantum physics terms, and you can say the perceiver has collapsed into the perceiving. So perceiving is a verb, right? Can you notice the perceiving that is happening through your eyes right now? Can you just notice it? Well, behind that perceiving, which is very easy to notice it, behind that perceiving, you have a fantasy that there is a perceiver behind, right? That perhaps is called Gian or whatever. This fantasy is no more than a fantasy. That thing does not exist. The perceiver is never there. There is the perceiving. That's why in the scriptures, I think it says somewhere that God is a verb. Perceiving. So the perceiving is what you are, and there is no perceiver behind. So oneness is when the perceiving and the perceived have become one, right? And for that, there are certain exercises that you can do in order to lead to that place. But I'm not going to go there today, because way before that, we have to understand or collapse the perceiver and the perceiving into one. And just that is enough to create a tremendous shift. So, to tell you a little bit about my own awakening, I was with my teacher in a conversation. His name is Jim Rivers. Some of you know him. And I was doing some introspection, and I had already learned to step back and to rest as awareness. And so I had that clear, and I had been in fact teaching that for some years. But I noticed in my introspection that I still was looking for something behind, the perceiving. So, an awareness in English, as you know, is a noun, right? So it's confusing, because you think, well, what is the awareness? I have to find it. It's somewhere behind. So after probably many times noticing this inside, I asked him, well, when I look inside, I see that there is perceiving, but when I look for the perceiver, I find nothing. It's like I cannot go beyond that and find the perceiver or the awareness. And he turned to me and said, but that doesn't exist. The perceiver doesn't exist. And that was it. I got it. You know? I got this simple thing that there's nothing behind your perceiving. Not a me, not an I, not an awareness, not a God, nothing. The perceiving that is looking through your eyes right now is the ultimate. That's it. Try to find something else behind. A soul that perceives. That's another great story, right? There is my soul inside that has perception and is perceiving through this body. Try to find her. Find your soul. It's a beautiful story. And it's just a story. What happens there is not that the soul it's not that the soul doesn't exist as it's just it doesn't exist as we were told. What happens is that when the body, the physical body dies, the astral body separates from the physical body, and then it begins to, as we have learned in all these interesting near-death experiences, the astral body looks down and sees the physical body laying on the bed, and looks around and sees the room, and if it looks a little bit more, begins to see astral beings coming, right? Well, very nice. The problem is that what is looking through the astral body, guess what it is? What is it? It's the same consciousness. So now the problem is that you are in the astral, you see other astral beings coming, and you erroneously conclude that I am an astral being. Same as you erroneously conclude that here you are a human being. You are not an astral being, you are not a human being, you are the awareness that is seeing through these things, through these instruments. You are the consciousness that is perceiving through the human body and perceiving through the astral body and perceiving through the causal body, and these are just instruments of sensory perception. With the human body you are attuned with the physical world, and consciousness is able to see and perceive and enjoy the physical world. Through the astral body, consciousness can see and perceive the astral body, the astral world, and enjoy the astral worlds. It's beautiful. But that doesn't define you. You are not a human body, you are not a soul, you are not the astral body, you are not the human body, you are the awareness that is perceiving through these instruments. And when you try to find a soul that has awareness and is looking outward, you don't find it in your experience because it's not there. It's just a confusion in how these things have been presented to us. Yes?
In your viewpoint, would be what some traditions call the I am presence, is that also just another word for consciousness?
Yes, absolutely. The presence. And the presence, when you step back and you rest as the noticing, you are in the presence. You have made contact with the presence. With capital P, the divine. It's a beautiful word. When you notice the spaciousness around you, like the lady was talking about, this spaciousness, this expansion, right? That expansion is the presence. What else could be? When you remove the idea of the I, as you remove it, then the spaciousness begins to come. You remove the idea of the I, the spaciousness immediately begins to appear. So when we look at Eckhart Tolle's teachings, he says sometimes he talks about the spaciousness, sometimes he talks about the presence, indistinctly. The spaciousness is the presence of the divine. You have made contact with your true self. And there are specific ways to do this, to attract the spaciousness and to get rid of the I. One of them is what we have been doing, but there are many.
Isn't it just a matter of definition that that contact with the divine, if you call that the I am presence, that single point of awareness, could that be defined as the true I?
Well, the problem, if we define consciousness or awareness, we define it as an I, and we still keep the idea that an I is something that has a separate existence, an individuality, we are making a mistake there, because awareness, what is seen through your eyes right now, it has no individuality. It's not defined by anything, by any mental content that may be in the brain or in the memory, nor by any past experience. So it's undefinable. So because it is undefinable, we cannot give it an identity. And the word I is always connected to an identity. That's why I don't like to use the word I or the true I, because it creates confusion. Because usually we reserve that word for identity, that which has identity. And what is the identity? The identity is definitions of me. You can say an identity is a basket of thoughts about me, and you can make a list. I am Gian, I am 58, I am this, I am that, and you can make a list. And I guarantee it's as simple as that. This identity is a basket of I am this, I am that type of thoughts in a basket in your memory. If Alzheimer comes, and erase the memory, the identity is gone. It's totally gone. It's memory based. But what is left, even in the Alzheimer patient, still still is there, right? I don't know exactly what is there, but it's there. The life is there. It's seeing through the eyes of the patient and perceiving through the ears. Consciousness is there. The memory was erased. So the memory is the I is memory based. No memory, no I. No I, no identity. No identity, then what is left, which is awareness, has no identity.
I'm with you all the way. We're above the feelings, above the thought, transcending feelings, thoughts, at the apex of your individuated existence in what I would call the oneness. That I am presence, that divine spark that sees through our bodies, that's what I would, at least maybe prior to tonight, that's what I would call the I, the true I.
Oh, yeah. It would be a name, right? It would be a name
Just
to
a
call the divine this true I. And then we choose, if we like the word, we keep it. If we don't, we discard it. These are words, these are words. Many times I like more the word perceiving because it's more concrete than the word awareness, right? It would be better to say awarenessing, because it's more like a verb than a noun. Also, one thing that I suggest that you consider in this whole thing is that the divine that we're looking for as seekers, or we were looking for as seekers, the divine has to be present in the human experience. It cannot not be, otherwise we would be dead, right? So you can look for a wacky cosmic consciousness experience to find God or the divine in the cosmos. But why not looking first about a very simple experience why not looking first for the divine in your own human experience? Here and now, in your human experience, the divine has to be here, otherwise you would be dead. So there is this story in India of a deer that has a pouch that produces a particular scent. And then the deer smells the scent and loves it, begins to look for it, and goes on looking for it and looking for it and looking for it until it gets totally desperate and finally jumps out of a cliff and dies. So this is the story of the seeker. The seeker, the essence is in us, and we need to look in ourselves, in our experience, and it's right here, it's right behind our eyes. It's that which is hearing these words, that which is listening to these words, that which is seeing this room. That is the divine. Don't try to look for it in a, again, wacky cosmic experience. No, don't do that, because you are going to be disappointed. Because these spiritual experiences, they are, they come or they don't come. It's very difficult to produce them, and sometimes you succeed at producing them, and then you had an incredible spiritual experience, cosmic experience, and then the next day you have nothing, and you thought that you lost everything. You haven't lost anything. You're still the divine, but in the human experience now, perceiving through the human body. And that has not been recognized, although perhaps you had a cosmic experience or in cosmic consciousness, right? So I remember when I was young, I was 23, 24 years old, and I read this book. Many of you may have read it. It's called Autobiography of a Yogi. Anyone here read it? Right? Oh, everyone. Great. You're good readers. Well, you may have read this chapter. It's called An Experience in Cosmic Consciousness. You remember it? Everyone remembers that? Okay, there you have, an extraordinary experience. And it catapults many of us into an obsessive seeking. For what? For an experience like that. Of course, it was very enticing, right? You can have an experience like that with a mushroom, and the mushroom will do a pretty good job. Then you come back and nothing changed. And worst of all, you didn't understand the experience. So that you cannot reproduce it, you didn't understand it, it was without insight into your true nature. You just had a wonderful mushroom experience. I have a student in South Africa that he was living in Jamaica for quite a long time. He was a minister, and we were talking about these subjects, and then he said to me, in Jamaica I probably had about 100 powerful mushroom experiences, but I never understood what I was. He never got it. Because in this thing, although we could say that obviously to step back and rest as awareness, to notice the perceiving, these are not intellectual things. Say you are running, so to speak, away from the mind, and you're resting away from the mind, and you're beginning to get in contact with your true self, which is consciousness, is not mind. However, the interesting thing is that if we don't understand exactly what's happening and how it's happening, it's like there is no integration of the experience, and therefore it will be very difficult to eventually sustain it, and will be just a memory somewhere there. Oh, I had this interesting experience some time ago. So the intellect plays a role in this, and it's a very important role. It's the role of integrating the experience, integrating the experience of consciousness, of contacting the presence, as you put it, integrating the experience in a coherent understanding that will allow you to access the experience over and over anytime you want. You may lose the experience. You are, for example, another pointer that is beautiful, resting as no one. You feel very empty, totally empty inside. It's beautiful. And then suddenly something happens and you lose it. And you feel very full of you. And unhappy, of course. But now, the process that led to you experiencing the emptiness, the process and the understanding of the process of each little step in the process and what the experience means, allows you to go back and recapture the experience again. Otherwise, it becomes just a floating memory and you don't know how to access it. There was no integration of the experience in the psyche. So I have done very little psychedelics in my life, although I have a great respect for them. But the one time that I used a mushroom with a friend, after the experience, we sat down and we really do a lot of integration, working at integrating and trying to understand this experience, because the mushroom is capable of giving you a oneness experience. However, to be honest with you, despite all my efforts to integrate the experience at that time, it did not really register deep. The integration was poor. So this is the problem with substances, is that they give us the experience, but then the capacity to integrate the experience is very limited, because we didn't access the experience step by step by step. It was suddenly, boom, you're there, right? You're there in a oneness experience. And then a moment later, boom, you're back. And then you try to integrate the experience, and it's challenging. So the intellectual part here plays a very important role in the way I see it. The intellect has been downplayed in many spiritual traditions. It has been practically put down, stepped on, and is the enemy, but wait a second, what are we talking about? If you look into Buddhism, for example, the Buddhist path in its highest form, it's conformed by three different elements: compassion, meditation, and the analytical path. So you talk with a Buddhist that really knows the subject, that has been there for a long, long time, and they will tell you, well, most religions teach compassion. Most religions teach meditation. But very few teach the analytical aspect of Buddhism, which will lead you to the proof that everything is empty. And they have a unique language to communicate this and to help you to realize this truth, that everything is empty. So, again, in the analytical path, in Buddhism, there is respect for the intellect, not putting it down. It plays a role in the whole thing. And it plays a valuable role. How are we doing time-wise? Do you have questions? Yes, please.
So,
I'm going to repeat your question for those online, okay?
so when we get to that space, right?
When we get to that space
Of being awareness,
of being awareness,
and we die.
and we die,
So then we don't take any baggage with us because it's gone with the memory, right? Or do
we don't take any baggage with us because the memory is gone.
right? Or I mean, before we get to that space, I assume that each time we die, we somehow that memory must be stored somewhere, that we come back with it if we do believe in reincarnation, coming back, and karma, and
Yes.
all those things, right? So that means
Well, let me explain. What comes, the memory of the present incarnation. Let's say you die and the astral body separates and goes to the astral, right? There is a physical memory in the brain, and there is an astral memory in the astral brain. And then that astral memory is extremely accurate, and it has registered every little experience throughout your whole life. So this is what we are seeing now with the near-death experience cases, where people, they remember in a flash their whole life with minute details. So there is a superconscious memory, it's called, in the astral brain. The astral brain is like a super computer, and is being programmed and reprogrammed through each incarnation. Your experiences are modifying the astral body, so that the next time you come, the modifications to the astral body that came as a result of your present incarnation, some of those modifications will come back with you. Let's say you, in this incarnation, you learned to play the piano, you became a fantastic piano performer. The next incarnation, you come back not knowing how to play the piano, but with the ability to play the piano, to learn the piano very fast. That's why we have geniuses that at 3-4 years old, they are playing the piano already. So the memory comes back through in the astral body, and in the new body, that memory is already there. However, throughout the whole process, in this incarnation, while you were in the astral and in the next one, the perception that has been there, the perceiving function, has always been just the true you. And everything else that could be called an identity, your identity in your first incarnation, your identity as a soul that has a different name in the astral, and your identity later here, all these identities are thought-based. They are not real. Does that answer your question?
well, my question is, does that go infinitum, or is there a point where we go to that pure realization of being only awareness?
Yeah, I think that
go to zero and erase all those memories?
yeah, I think that eventually the first thing that will happen, my impression, I'm not sure, and also I'm talking a little bit from Yogananda's teachings that he mentions this. Eventually we will get tired of coming to the human experience, and then we will stay in the astral only.
Right.
But we will have things in the astral body that need to be worked out, and then they are called astral karma. And then you work out those, and then you move to a more subtle realm, which is called the causal, and then eventually you discover that also, and you basically awareness goes back to itself. And then these false identities that were created throughout the whole process, over and over in each incarnation and so on, they are all gone because they were never really true to begin with. They were just stories over stories over stories. So these identities don't need to, they will become possibly no more than a memory in the super mind of God, so to speak.
Yeah.
But these identities don't have any transcendental importance, the way I see it. They exist for a while, and then they are gone. The identity as your name, what's your name?
Evelyn.
Evelyn, your identity of Evelyn, may last for 80 years or a little bit more, a blink of an eye, and then it's gone. And eventually will mean very little, even to you as a soul, and then even the identity as a soul will mean very little.
Yeah, I don't relate to it very much anyway.
Right. So I would say that liberation is this working towards being free from attachment to these identities, so that we don't fear death, we don't fear that we will disappear. All these are stories in the mind and programs that need to go, because we, as what we really are, is this awareness will never disappear. That thing is very constant. We can see, for example, that awareness is something you can see that it is constant in our everyday experience. You wake up in the morning, awareness is there, perceiving the room, listening to the sounds, the clock, the alarm of the clock. You turn off the alarm, and then you continue with your day. The day continues, awareness is there. You take your breakfast, you savor your food, awareness is there. You go to work, awareness is there so that you can drive the car on the freeway. You arrive to work and awareness is there, otherwise you couldn't do your work. And then it stays all day long, and at night, finally you go to sleep.